guys, we're going to take a look at another type of question, a bit more complicated than the previous exercise that I made a video for. This question asks for a bit more from the user, so let's take a look at it and let's see what we can do. Now, before I get into this question, I need to remind everyone that obviously there's more than one way to solve a problem, especially when it comes to programming. Now, there's some good practices and there's some bad practices. Our objective is to be as efficient as possible. Okay, so let's take a look at this question and let's try and underline and highlight some of the things that are interesting to us. So this one says create a program that will ask the user to enter 5 numbers. If their sum is above 100, then output the message amazing. If their sum is below 100, then output the message try again. Okay, now from first inspection, something should really hit your eye. Okay, and it's this enter 5 numbers. Okay, so the moment that you see, well, it should say actually input 5 numbers. So the moment you see being asked to do something more than once, it should make your brain ring some bells and call out, oh my god, we need a loop. Okay, so I'm going to underline this, okay, and I'm going to highlight the number 5, just to remember that we need 5 numbers, and also the word input, whoops, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to highlight it to yellow, because input means that we're going to basically store something. Okay, and then it says check if their sum, which is again an important thing to highlight, is above 100. We should output the message amazing. If it's below 100, then we should output the words try again. Okay, and I've missed something else that's important. Here is an if statement. Okay, so it's a conditional statement. Okay, now we need a couple of things now to make this work. We need a variable, so I'm going to type here in bullets. We need a variable to store the numbers. So I'm going to put in parentheses something like num or number, one of the two. Okay, and this is to the numbers the user will type. Okay. What I also see here is we need 5 numbers, so we need a loop. I think for loop is the best one in this case. Okay. I just noticed something. I'm writing Pascal here. Okay. To ask for 5 numbers. Okay. And we need a variable to store the sum. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of our notes. Okay, and I think we should get started. Now the only tricky part is how to store the sum. How do I add up all the numbers? Okay, well, since since in programming a variable can only keep one value inside, it means that we have to do some addition every time the user enters a number. Okay, because if we don't add the numbers up while they're being input, we basically won't know what the sum is. And we'll see how to do that in programming right now. So let's see. So I'm going to create a new program here. I'm going to call it program ex2, like so. As always, I'm going to write my begin and my end, like so. And I'm going to write my variables. So I'm going to write var, and I need 2 variables. I need a variable for sum, and I need a variable for the number. So I'm going to create a num variable, which is integer. Okay, and I'm going to create a sum variable, which again will be of type integer. Okay, since all the numbers that we are going to input are going to be whole numbers, since the question doesn't specify, and since I can only see whole numbers here, Okay. So now let's begin with the easy stuff. Um, First of all, I'm going to tell Pascal that num is equal to 0 when the program starts. And I'm also going to tell it that sum is also equal to 0 when the program starts, just to keep things clear. Okay? And just so that you guys can see that this is actually happening in the code, I'm going to add a bit of extra code here. I'm going to put a write-len statement to show the value of num is. I'm going to leave another space so that whatever I write next doesn't get stuck to the word, to the colon here. And I'm going to show what num has inside. So I'm going to type num, and I'm going to close parentheses. And I'm also going to write another write-len statement. And I'm going to say the value of sum is. I'm going to do pretty much the same thing, like so, comma, and I'm going to write sum. Okay. Now, what's going to happen now is basically when the program starts, it's going to show me these two lines on the screen, and it will show me the value of num, which is 0, and it will also show me the value of sum, which is currently 0. Okay, now let's get back to the question itself. It asks me to input 5 numbers. Since we need 5 numbers, I'm going to be using a for loop, okay? But to use a for loop, we need a variable. Any loop that we create, either it's a for, a repeat, or a while, we need a variable to keep track of what's going on in the loop, to keep track of how many times it's been repeated. So I'm going to create another variable here that I forgot to create before, and I'm going to call this variable count. Okay, and it's also going to be an integer, like so. And I'm going to begin my for loop. So I'm going to type in for count 1 to 5 do, okay, whoops, and the for loop has begin and end statements, so I'm going to write begin and end, and the little semicolon, okay, like so. And now I've got the structure for my for loop, and now I need to ask for 5 numbers. So if I didn't use a for loop, I would have to write-len, enter a number 5 times. Now since I have a for loop, I can just do that straight away. So I can just write write-len here, and I can put a single quote and say enter a number, like so. Okay, so what's going to happen now is, since this statement is in the for loop, this statement will appear 5 times on screen. Now, it's going to happen so fast that you will think that it instantly writes this thing 5 times, but in reality what's happening is it's going from line 16 to line 17. It will appear once, then it moves down to line 19, and then it will go over and over again until it reaches 5 times. Now, I forgot a semicolon here. We also want to store whatever numbers being written in the program, okay? Because we're asking for 5 numbers, and we want to add them up at some point. Now, the only way to add the numbers up by using variables is we need one variable to store them and one variable to collect them, okay? So I'm going to put readlen, okay, and I'm going to store whatever the user wrote in the num variable, like so. Okay, so let's say that the user first entered the number 5. Okay, that number 5 will be put in the num variable, so num now is equal to 5. Now, to add them up, we need to explain to Pascal how we're going to do this. So we're going to say the sum will be calculated as follows. The sum is equal to whatever number has been input last, so num, in this case it's 5, plus whatever's already in the sum. Okay? So don't forget that when we started the program, we said that num was 0 and sum was 0 again. When the user entered a number, okay, let's say the number 5, number automatically became 5. Okay? But we also remember that sum was 0 to begin with. Okay, so when this is stored, the next line will run and we'll try and figure out what's happening to sum. So the formula says that we'll add the last number that was entered plus the existing value of the sum, which was 0. So if I've only entered one number, the number 5, currently, the first time that the loop is running, the sum is currently 5. Then this will come to the end and it will go all the way to the top, and the program will ask for another number. Let's say that the user enters the number 10. Number now becomes 10, and we need to update whatever's happening in sum. Don't forget that sum was 5 just a moment ago, so 10 plus 5 is 15, and this will happen over and over and over again until we reach 5 times. Okay, now I think we don't need anything else in our for. Let's take a look at the question one more time. Input 5 numbers and check if their sum is 100. You should output amazing. If their sum is below 100, we should type in try again. Okay, so now we need a conditional statement to check the sum. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Pascal. Okay, and the conditional statement should not be put inside the loop. Because if we put it inside the loop, every time a number will be entered, our program will be checking and it will say amazing or try again every single time. Okay, but in this case we want to output after it's finished whether it was amazing or whether we should try again. So to do that, we need to create an if statement like so, and we need to check if the sum was it greater than 100, above 100 and below 100. Okay, so if the sum is above 100, then we need a begin and an end statement. Whoops, like so. And we're going to write ln, and we're going to say amazing, like so. And then I'm going to come below, and I'm going to type else, begin and an end here, like so. And I'm going to write ln, and I'm going to type in try again, like so. Remember that because I'm using an else statement, anything that's part of the if loop, the if statement above should not have a semicolon. So no semicolon here, no semicolon here. And now to make sure that the message stays on screen, I'm going to add a readln statement right at the end of the program. So I'm going to compile and execute this. So I'm going to call it exercise 2. I'm going to save it. There's no errors. That's brilliant. And I'm going to go and execute and see what happens. So I'm going to zoom in so that you guys can see. So the program starts. All these variables are created. The number variable is given the value of 0. The sum variable is given the value of 0. So we can see that here. So we have a write ln, and it says the value of the num is, and it shows us whatever's inside num, so 0, like so. And then it says the value of sum is, and it shows us whatever's in the variable sum, which is 0 currently. Don't forget, this is currently. This is when the program begins, okay? And then it goes straight for the for loop. It's entered the for loop, and it's asking us to enter a number. Now, immediately, the moment that I write a number and I press enter, all of this will happen extremely fast. Now, the moment I hit enter, 100 will be stored in the variable num, so it will be 100 plus 0. Okay? Remember, this is the first number we've entered. Okay? So the sum should be 100 at this point, because it's the only number we've currently entered. If I press enter now, all of this will happen, and I should be brought back to this statement again. So it says enter a number. I'm going to put 22. And 22 now will be added to the sum, which was 100 before. So it should be 122. Okay, now I'm going to add the number 8. Okay, the moment I press enter, 8 will be added to 122, which should give me 130. I'm going to add 15 now. 15 will be added to the sum, so that should be 145. And I'm going to add another number, 5, which should basically take me to 150. Okay, so this 5 will be added to the previous sum, okay, and it should give me 150. So the moment I press enter, this should end. It shouldn't ask for another number, and it should check if the sum was 100, greater than 100, or it will see if it was less than 100. So I'm going to hit enter. Since we have 150, it should show amazing. Awesome. Now, what if I wanted to show what the sum was and then actually show it was amazing? Well, there's two ways I can do it. I can either add to this right-ln statement here, okay, or I can create another right-ln. So I can do this. I can type here right-ln, and I can say the sum was, okay, I'm going to leave an extra space here, colon, comma, and since I want to show what the sum was, I need to show what we stored in the variable sum in the last minute. I'm going to type sum, like so. And I'm going to do the same. I'm going to copy this. In case the sum was below 100, I want to show what it was. So let's see how that's going to work. I'm going to compile, and whoops, there seems to be a problem somewhere. Interesting. It doesn't like what I've done here. So, okay, we're going to edit this a bit. Okay, we're going to edit this statement a bit. We're going to remove one of the right-lns because Pascal doesn't seem to like it. Actually, let's see. Maybe it will like this. No. Okay. Now, I'm going to edit this. So I'm going to say the sum was, and it will show the value of sum. And then I'm going to type amazing. Okay. Since I don't want amazing to be stuck to whatever the number of sum is, I'm going to put an extra space at the beginning, like so. And now I can get rid of this, like so. And I'm going to compile. I've forgotten a semicolon here. Now I'm going to compile and execute it now and see what's going to happen. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to go up here. The program started. The variables are defined. The number 0 has been given to the num variable. The number 0 has also been given to the sum variable. And we're printing this on the screen just to prove that num is currently equal to 0 and sum is currently equal to 0. Here it is. Okay. And then it's already in the loop. It's already in the for loop. And it's asking me to enter a number. So I'm going to type in the number 10. It's added the number 10 to sum. So 10 plus 0 is currently 10. Okay. And then it's asking me to do the same thing again. I'm going to type in 55, 5, 10, and there's one more. I'm going to add 35 and see what's going to happen. So now it should add all these numbers up. So it should be 60, 70, it should be 105. The sum should be equal to 105. So when I press enter, it's going to check what the sum is. In this case, it's again above 100. So it's going to write the sum was, and it will show me the value of sum, which was 105. And then it should say amazing. Let's see. Well, my mathematics was off. So the sum was 115, and then it says amazing. Excellent. Okay. What if I wanted now to make this program a bit more interesting? Okay. And I wanted to put numbers in front of each of these questions. So enter a number. I would like it to say number 1. Enter a number, number 2, enter a number 3, enter a number, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so to do something like that, to make numbers appear before this text, and to be incremented, we need a variable that counts. Any variable that counts, okay, can be used in front of this phrase to illustrate which number we're at, okay? And magically enough, if we take a look at our program, we have three variables. We have the number variable, which is used to store the number that the user will input, the sum variable, which is used to add up whatever the user has put, and the count variable, which is used by the for loop to count every time the loop is running. So the first time the loop is running, it will be 1. The second time it's running, it will be 2. The third time it's running, it will be 3, and so forth and so forth. So, obviously now, we know that we have a variable that's counting automatically in our program, and it's called count. And it's counting automatically because it's in the for loop. It's being used by the for loop. The for loop, every time it reaches the end, okay, it automatically adds 1 to the count. Okay, so in this case, here where it says write-ln, I'm going to type in count, comma, okay, so it's going to tell me the value of count every time the loop is running, okay, and just to make it look a bit neater, before the enter a number, I'm going to put a full stop, okay, so if it's the first time that it's running, it should say 1 here, full stop, enter a number. So let's compile and execute it and see. Okay, so the program's working exactly as it was before until this point. Okay, so everything's the same until this point. And now we've added a bit of extra to our for loop. Okay, so we're just showing the current value of the count variable in front of our text. Okay, so when the for loop starts, the count variable is equal to 1. Okay, and then when we're using the write-ln, okay, we're just showing what that count is equal to, 1. So if I put a number and I press enter, the number will be stored in num, the number will be added to the sum, and then the count will also be updated to 2. So the for loop automatically will be updating the count variable. So I'm going to press enter, and as you can see now, it says 2 because this is the second time we're going to be running this loop. Okay, and it's asking me to enter another number. I'm going to put 10 again. And the third time, count has now become 3. So it should show 3 here, and then enter a number. I'm going to keep on putting 10s so that you can see. Don't forget that these numbers are being stored in the num variable, and then they're also, one by one, being added to the sum. So the first time num was added to 0, so that was 10. The second time it was added to 10, so that would be 20. The third time it was added to 10, so that would be so forth and so forth. You get the point. Okay, so I'm going to add another 10, and I'm going to add another 10. Now, this time, the sum will be less than 100, so in our program, this statement here will be bypassed, okay, and since it's not greater than 100, and it should show us this in 2 different lines. The sum was, okay, and then it should show us the value of the sum, so it should be 50, and then it should say try again on another line. So let's see. So there we go. The sum was 50, try again. Now, you can do all sorts of things to your loop. You can even show how much the sum was every time you added a number. So let's say I want to show every time this happens, every time I add the input to the sum, I can also add another write-ln statement like this, and I can say currently the sum is, okay, like so, and I can show whatever the sum is at this point. So I can type in the variable that holds the sum, and I'm going to put a semicolon, and let's see what's going to happen. So compile and execute. So every time the user enters a number, we'll be told what our current sum is. Okay? Whoops. Let's see. Everything's the same again, but now when I add a number, when I put the number 10, let's say now, it should say currently the sum is 10, and then it should start over again. It should ask me for another number. So I'm going to put 10, and it says currently the sum is 10. If I add another number, let's say 66, it should say currently the number is 76. There you go. If I add another number, let's say, I don't know, 93, okay, it says currently the sum is 169. If I add another number, and so forth and so forth. Okay? Now, it says currently the sum is 200, and then it says the sum was 200. That's amazing. It looks a bit silly, but you get the point. You can do all sorts of things to your program just by showing whatever you're saving in your variables. Okay, so this was a bit of a more complex program, and we did do much more than the question asked, okay, just to point out what we can do with just a few write-a-lens and read-a-lens. Now, the only thing that should be new to you is this statement here, how we add numbers in a loop, okay? Remember that if you want to add a number or any input in a loop, you will need a variable to store the sum. Okay, so we created a variable called sum, and then all we do is we add the input, in this case it was num, to the existing sum. This is a must know. You need to know how to do this. This is what I would call SOS, the most important thing out of this lesson. It's the most important thing. Now, another thing that you guys might have not realized until we wrote this statement here, okay, is that every time the loop is running, count becomes +1. It increases by 1 every time. So just by showing the value of count, we made it look like a numbered list. Like so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Now, it's a lot to take in, but if you practice enough and if you think of your own scenarios, you can make something similar quite easy. Okay? I'd like you guys to practice on this and give it a go. Let me know if you have any trouble with some of these questions or trying to do something similar. I'll be looking forward to your feedback. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll catch you in the next one.